Hi guys, Lisa here from Astrology Sphere. I hope you managed to survive the weekend of all weekends, the astrological headline weekend of the lunar eclipse along with the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. Yeah, let's just say it's been quite full on for most people, but I think also a relief actually, particularly as we're heading into the waning cycle of the moon. Where people really feel as though whatever the burdens they've been carrying around or processing over the last 6 months are really on the way out. So that's a nice relief, basically. I also think a lot of people noticed the ingress of Venus into Pisces. It kind of brought in a heart-opening, uplifting, hopeful energy back in, which I think was needed. I think, you know, Saturn and Pluto together can really make you feel as though you've kind of lost the will to live, and I think this ingress of Venus into the place where she's exalted has been a very welcome sort of boost of optimistic, forward-thinking, hopeful kind of energy. But really we're now into the waning moon cycle, which means that that energy of the last 6 month eclipse cycle is now well and truly on the way out, and we're now moving towards the new moon in Aquarius, and that's really what I want to talk about in this video. So this will be an ordinary, a regular lunar cycle, which means we won't have any kind of eclipse, but what it will do is it'll reset the energies so that we can now move more fully into the energy of the current eclipse cycle, which began on the 26th of December with the Capricorn solar eclipse. The other thing to say about it is that it carries some interesting signatures that followed on actually from the eclipse that I twinned with the Cancer lunar eclipse. So this particular moon happens in the same Sabin symbol or degree as the blood moon lunar eclipse in Aquarius that we had again in late July of 2018. So the lunar eclipse was twinned with the solar eclipse that happened in early July, and this then is it's almost the follow-on. So it's kind of a twinning with the full moon lunar eclipse energy of Aquarius that happened back then. So you might want to just go back and have a look at your journals to see if there's any overlaps in terms of themes that are likely to come up now. That particular eclipse was interesting because it had the signature of Uranus, which this one does too, and it happens in the sign of Aquarius, which is ruled by Uranus, and on top of that, Uranus, the planet Uranus, will be making a square to both the sun and the moon. So Uranian energy will be strong again, and in this sense we're almost taken back to around about late August, early September, where a lot of the personal planets made aspects to Uranus, which at that time was retrograde. So I think now that Uranus has turned direct, it turned direct on the same day as the lunar eclipse in Cancer on the 10th of January. So now that Uranus is moving forward again, and we're now going back through the same degrees where Uranus was back in July of 2018. It'll be interesting to see again whether it throws up themes from that time, and almost gives us a chance to sort of conclude them or find a way to integrate them, because what happens is that Uranus, or most planets that retrograde, will go over the same position about 3 times. So they'll go in the first time, then they'll go over it again during the retrograde, and then as they start to move forward again, they'll go over the same point in the zodiac. So that's just worth bearing in mind. That's why you essentially in astrology you get 3 opportunities to really come to grips with a particular transit. So this one, now that Uranus is direct, really what we're doing is we're kind of we're working with the energies on the outer level. So when energies are retrograde, not only are we looking backwards, but we're also looking inwards. Now we're sort of taking what we've learned from around August and September, and we are now implementing and integrating it into our lives, and we may see signs that we're doing so through synchronicities that happen on the outside that just almost confirm that we're on the right track as far as making positive changes to our life. So the other thing I want to say about this upcoming moon cycle is that there's some fabulous energy before and after this event, because I should say that the square to Uranus is not always easy energy, in the sense that squares bring tension, so they can bring either sort of struggles with other people or circumstances that are challenging, or it could be that it heightens your anxiety levels. Uranus is quite a highly strung planet, and generally when we get negative lunar aspects in particular to Uranus, there tends to be a kind of almost an upsurge in voltage in the body, in the electrical system of the body, and that can sometimes cause systems to go haywire, or just you kind of overthink, you can't sleep. It's that kind of really nervy, wired feeling, basically. So that's just something to bear in mind as we get to the new moon. You might want to do something to earth yourself and just to get rid of that excess energy, whether it's exercise, whether it's meditation, or whether it's salt baths, walking in nature, whatever works for you in terms of kind of earthing and getting rid of excess energy. Right, so now we're going to have a closer look at the astrology around the new moon in Aquarius. I'm going to have a look briefly at the overall energies and themes, then at the chart, and then I'm going to break down the themes for each zodiac sign. I'm also going to go into the connections between this particular new moon and the lunar eclipse, the blood moon lunar eclipse that we had back in July of 2018, because there are some connections there. But I'm only going to do this in my extended forecast, which is reserved for members. So if you haven't signed up already, you might want to go to my website and subscribe. It's absolutely free, and it means that you won't miss out on anything kind of going forward. So in terms of overall energies and themes for this particular new moon, it's fair to say that it's going to have a very different feeling to the last lunar phase that we've just come out of, the full moon Cancer eclipse, which was closing out the 6-month cycle begun in July of 2019. So this, even though the sign of Aquarius is that of the water bearer, it's actually an air sign. So we're now moving away from water energy, which is all about the feels, to air energy, which is a lot more cerebral, it's a lot more detached, and it allows us to take that slightly more elevated helicopter view of what's happened over the last 6 months, to get clear about where we want to go forward and basically shift our emphasis from the past to the future. Aquarius is also ruled by the planet Uranus, and Uranus is going to feature quite strongly in this particular lunar phase because the Sun and Moon will be making aspects to this planet. So this puts the emphasis back onto Uranian energy. So we're talking here about the future, we're talking about technology, we're talking about the importance of community and the collective. And then of course we have to add another layer to that. We have to say, okay, it's the moon in Aquarius, so how is the moon going to behave in this particular sign? And of course the moon is about domesticity, it's about everyday occurrences, rituals, it's about our habits. So really what we're looking at here is how to use what we've learned and our emphasis on technology and community to improve everyday life and just generally to function in a kind of a higher, less emotional, perhaps more balanced way going forward. So what are we looking at in terms of themes for the upcoming month? Well, in a nutshell, the moon in Aquarius is really about a number of things. First of all, it's about celebrating your uniqueness. So really getting a sense of the unique talents and gifts that you have to offer, and then how you can use those to contribute to the collective. Because Aquarian energy is all about the kind of brotherhood of man. So it's really about how you take your ideals and principles and you apply them, often in a collaborative fashion, so through a group or through activism, some sort of combined effort in order to improve society or for the greater good of all. I think that it's also going to highlight how we live day to day, and I think there's a quiet revolution going on in that sense. And I think it began with the ingress of Uranus into Taurus back in May of 2018, where we've seen the way people eat has changed. There's more emphasis on veganism, for example, the growth of veganism. We've also seen people wanting to to cook and to shop in a way that's more sustainable, so maybe buying locally, fresh produce and that kind of thing. And I think it's going to extend now to technology, so how we can use technology to bring an added level of not just convenience but also a more sustainable way of living. So for example, using the Internet of Things to lower your carbon footprint, so switching off your boiler or your lowering your power outage, your consumption when you're not at home, through remote means. I think we could also see this extend to keeping our pets happy during the day. We've now got things like cameras that can where we can talk to our pets and release this kind of treat dispensers. So I think we're going to see those types of things really highlighted in the next month or so. The other thing that Aquarius energy is really good for is finding your tribe. And I think that after the quite emotional energy of the last eclipse cycle, where people became aware of where they didn't fit in, or how their roles within particular groups or relationships was really not working to anybody's benefit, and some people might have been left behind, and so now there's that sense of, well, where there's a gap or a vacuum, in come birds of a feather. So I think there's going to be a sense of like attracting like, and if you've had to let people go sort of over the last 6 months, then I think you're really going to be welcoming in those people that you resonate with more strongly, perhaps over the next month or so. So those are just some of the moon in Aquarius themes that I think we will see constellating for the collective. So here we have the astrological chart for the Aquarius new moon. So there are a couple of things to point out about it. The first is that the sun and the moon are in Aquarius, and as we can see, there are a couple of planets that have already moved into the sign of Aquarius, including Mercury, which ingressed into Aquarius on the 15th or 16th of January, depending on where you are in the world. After that, the sun ingressed into Aquarius, as I said in my introduction, and then the moon followed. Then what's going to happen later this month, or later this year, in around about the equinox, so kind of halfway through March, Saturn is going to ingress into Aquarius. So it's quite interesting that this new moon in a way almost heralds the beginning of that particular shift away from Capricorn energy and the heaviness and intensity of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, and into a completely different paradigm, which I'm going to get into in the extended forecast. The other thing that's interesting about this chart is that the sun and the moon both make a square to Uranus. Now, the planet Uranus rules the sign of Aquarius, so this means that there's kind of a double dose of Aquarian/Uranian energy. Now, Uranian energy is essentially, in tarot terms, I like to think of it as being the tower on the one hand. So it's those things that happen suddenly or unexpectedly that can potentially blindside you, but it can also be those sudden flashes of inspiration that you get that almost seem to come out of nowhere, that makes things, make sense all of a sudden. So it's that energy that can be either sort of like breakthrough, or it can be a kind of a breakdown, depending on how flexible you are. So that's the other thing to bear in mind. When it comes to squares to Uranus, or any negative aspect to Uranus, it can heighten anxiety levels. It's almost as though the voltage in the body gets disturbed. There's sort of like a short circuit. Uranus rules electrical energy, and so there might be a temporary disturbance in your energy field. You just might want to ground at this time a little bit, doing whatever it is that you do to ground, whether it's eating root vegetables, walking barefoot, or taking salt baths. But it's just something that you might want to be aware of around about the time of the new moon. The other thing that makes this chart interesting is that the sun and the moon will be making a sextile to 2 points in astrology that are fairly modern. The one is Chiron, which is a centaur, and Chiron is the kind of, I don't want to say a planet because it's smaller than a planet, but it's basically
represents the wounded healer. So it's those aspects of us that where we've kind of been wounded in the past, where we feel vulnerable. It's kind of our soft spot. But it's also where we stand to learn the most, and also then potentially pass that knowledge on. So it's where we can become a teacher. We kind of teach best what we most need to learn kind of vibe. Now that's combining with Black Moon Lilith, and Black Moon Lilith is another one of those mathematical points like the lunar nodes, where it's basically where in the course of a lunar cycle over the course of a month, it's the opposite to kind of supermoon. So it's where the moon is at apogee doing that particular lunar cycle. In other words, it's the point in the moon's elliptical orbit when it is the furthest away from the earth during that particular lunar cycle. And so what Lilith has kind of come to symbolize is those emotions or repressed feelings that we don't really want to own, but that can trip us up. So they can either lead us to self-sabotage and prevent us from really coming into some form of self-empowerment, and can also stop us from maturing emotionally. Very often they are the type of emotions that we tend to project onto others. So for example, rage, jealousy, those really dark emotions that we would never own up to to most people, and it's also where we can become passive aggressive. So with Lilith currently in Aries, you may want to be aware of over the next month or so where people are either passive aggressive towards you, or you are passive aggressive towards them, and perhaps this is an opportunity to heal that particular dynamic. So either ignoring the behavior so that people are forced to actually confront you in a constructive way and say, this really pisses me off and let's try and sort it out, or potentially you having to basically grow a backbone and learn to deal with your anger in a more constructive way. So there's that potential that's possible over the next month or so. So now that we've got the what out of the way, the question you're probably asking yourself is, well, how does this new moon potentially affect me, or how can I use it to my advantage? And so this is where we get onto the where. So where will Aquarius fall in your chart? And as a kind of cheat sheet, I've created this table that breaks down where Aquarius will fall in relation to each of the signs of the zodiac. So read these for your rising sign, and the new moon will then fall in the correct life area as kind of outlined on this particular table. It's a good idea to think of it like this. A new moon is a time of setting intentions or planting seeds. So you're going to take the energy of Aquarius and you're going to plant seeds in a particular area of your life. So this allows you to kind of drill down and get more specific about how you use the energy when it comes to, for example, moon magic, candle magic, setting intentions, that kind of thing. Overall, though, this is also where the new moon is most likely to bring about changes in your life. So just take a moment to have a look at the table. You might want to jot down a few points and then decide how you're going to leverage this particular area of your life so that you can make some fresh starts.